For Friday also now. So we didn't call the first one. That's okay. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. So I know that some of us have already seated in the back. We're expecting a lot more people today than normal because of the holiday. It's a good thing. I see some of our younger folks back from the college and all that. Welcome all. So please move forward as much as possible. Take the spaces so that we don't have to stop during the khutbah time. And can everybody hear me on all sides? People on the right in the back who are moving forward? And people in the left who are also moving forward, can you hear me? All right, okay, good. Thank you.
السلام
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, Ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah, Ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. Hayya as-salah, hayya as-salah, hayya al-falah, hayya al-falah. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, La ilaha illallah.
إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونتوب إليه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهدي الله فلا مضل له وما يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا. أما بعد, it's always an extraordinary privilege and honor to be lucky to hit the weekend of Thanksgiving when most of the people in the community have time to gather and come here to this sacred and holy place in order to hear something that could inspire them, could motivate them, and could help them in their lives. While it's easy for the community, it's a little bit of a burden for the khatib because one has to oblige and make sure that those expectations are met. And my attempt today, inshallah ta'ala, will be to answer that call and do my best by praying to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for His tawfiq so I can deliver on this commitment. So the topic that I thought would be befitting to reflect on in order to tweak that flame and grow it with regard to the moment, the need for what is hopeful in the reminder, the discharging of the burden of guilt that a lot of Muslims feel, which seems to be crushing and ending, and figure out a way, inshallah, that we can thread something into this message where this moment here can be a moment of healing and a moment of inspiration. And though I reflected hard on this, I thought that one of the perhaps befitting topics would be to reflect on the following idea. So I'm going to start with a little story and a little analogy. Many of you who have raised young children in various capacities, parents, teachers, community leaders, and all other capacities from coaching to whatever you might have done. In your own way, I'm quite certain of what I'm going to say next, in your own way, you might have observed either the following scenario or something similar to it. And that is a young child that can be in your custody who looks at something and absolutely marvels at the wonders of what it is when they observe it and engage with it. In a classroom setting or in, say, a museum, you take a 5-year-old or a child that has begun to open his or her eyes to the world, and they look at this little ray of light that runs in front of them, that to the eye is undeceptively white. It's just a ray of light that's white, that's really crossing in front of their eyes in the setting that they are observing. Then the person facilitating the experience inserts in front of that light a little piece of glass, and the child's mouth gasps by saying, "Oh my goodness, I see colors. I cannot believe that all of these colors were hiding inside that white ray of light. How's that possible?" And out of a sudden, their excitement coming to life, the sense of wonder, the sense of discovery, the sense of curiosity that takes them over, rubs off the person who's the teacher and the adult, and that moment between them becomes a precious moment that rarely in life again you will be able to capture. I will submit to you that for us as Muslims, with the way we deal with our religion in our daily life, we have lost that wonder. We have lost that sense of curiosity, that sense of marveling at the disclosure that gets put in front of us. No one's mistake. Life deals us with hands that we have to just deal with. And it is in moments like these and in places like these that we attempt to restore and recover that memory and put it in its place. So the world that you engage with every single day and every moment is like that white ray of light. And in it hides a world of color and wonder and marvel. And today's khutbah is based on the following idea. What prism, what piece of glass are you going to bring to the world so you can see its magic and not see it reduced to a mere white ray of light? That's the topic of the khutbah today. The tradition of Islam has a lot to offer us in order to find those tools and negotiate our understanding of the world through them. That's the very good news. The challenging news is to pick some that are practical, that we can put immediately into action so we can bring back that sense of excitement and sense of wonder about our religion. Because I'll be very honest with you. One of the challenging turns that the Muslims have taken, specifically the Muslims in the West have taken over the last many years that I have been able to observe from the front row, is that many of us have become left brain dominant. Everything we try to understand with Islam, or everything that we feel is intelligible of Islam, or everything that we feel is erudite and informed and intellectual about Islam, has become too highly analytical. If we can't put it into an equation or an idea, then we are skeptical about what the teaching is. That's an incredible tragedy that we have to get in front of and be very careful about, because the inclinations that could lead us to where this could take us is to end up with certainly a rational religion, but totally gutted out from its inner meanings, its humanity, its connection to the reality of things that are ephemeral, but incredibly important to the balance that makes us human beings. Love, faith, care. These are things that you can't stick on the one end of an argument into a function and expect on the other end to get a number that you understand. It's about engagement and it's about feeling. And that sense of wonder today, my dear sisters, brothers, and respected elderly, that I want to submit for us to think about, that lens, that prism, that little magical tool that can open all of this up is to reflect on the names of Allah. There's this absolute wondrous verse in the Quran that comes to us in Surah Al-A'raf, in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says the following thing. بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. وَلِلَّهِ الْأَسْمَاءُ الْحُسْنَى. To Allah belong the most excellent and the most wondrous of names. You hear them, what are you supposed to do with them? فَادْعُوهُ بِهَا. Call upon him with those particular names. As you do so, you're going to come upon a dynamic of two forces that will act on you. Some that will follow along and want to share in that experience, and some that will dismiss you outright as being someone who hasn't matured. What do you do with the second group? وَذَرُوا الَّذِينَ يُلْحِدُونَ فِي أَسْمَائِهِ. Leave alone those who deny the wonder and the excellence and the marveling inside his names. سَيُجْزَوْنَ مَا كَانُوا يَعْمَلُونَ. To them will be a day of justice, and they will be rewarded for that which they have done. So here is what I am going to insist on for the rest of this particular khutbah. These two choices of this tool that's called the names of Allah, that is like the little prism that you put in front of light to make it go from a single beam that's just white to this marvelous expansion of colors, is what the names of Allah will do to you. You look at the world without invoking his names, and the world that you will see is flat, heartless, inhuman, and has no understanding in it whatsoever. You look at the world through the names of Allah, and the world is magical, special, and very inspiring. One day, at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, there is a Sahabi that used to go around, and they would ask him about Jannah, he would describe it. He would describe it materially. They would challenge him and they would say, how would you know? You haven't seen paradise. How would you know? Where is this knowledge coming to you from? So listen to his answer. Listen to his answer. In his case, he looked at the world through the eyes of the Prophet ﷺ. So he said, I read in the Quran that when the Prophet ﷺ ascended into the heavens, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala described the reality that he interacted with when he was in the presence of the divine, مَا زَاغَ الْبَصَرُ. When he saw what he saw, he did not experience an illusion or got snookered into something that is not real. He saw something. I'm a follower of him. I see the world through his eyes. And if he described Jannah to me, and I can describe it back to you, I want you to understand that the source I took it from is the mouth about which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says about the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, وَمَا يَنْتِقُ عَنِ الْهَوَىٰ. He never speaks out of whims or stories or myths. When the Prophet ﷺ describes something, it is a description of a reality that is haqqu yaqeen. He sees it and he calls it the way it is. So when I look at the world through his eyes, I am able to experience the world through his eyes. When you look at the world through the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you are able to experience the world for what it is, rather than experience the world for how it appears. The great philosopher, the Dutch great philosopher, Bernardo Kastrop, says something that I think is incredibly profound and invites a lot of inspiration and a lot of reflection. He says, in today's world, in today's modern world, people are mistaken into experiencing reality and experiencing reality through the cockpit that they see in front of them. Yeah, when you have a gauge that tells you what the airspeed is, or when you have a gauge that tells you what the outside temperature is, that's a reasonable reading of what that reality is. But you can't experience it until the wind runs through your hair, and until you go outside and the breeze touches your skin, and that becomes a different reality. And the names of Allah allow for the world and the religion and the deen of Islam to be experienced as a reality the way that Allah wants you to experience it, rather than you experiencing it through a cockpit. And I'm going to pause here for 5 seconds and give you an opportunity to absorb this as I unpack it further. What's the alternative? What happens if we don't do that? I will tell you what happens if we don't do that. And the answer is extremely simple. Look around you. Just become an astute observer of the world that is around you. If you take Allah out of the mediation between understanding the world you interact with and yourself, that is not the main lens through which you are looking at the world. Just look at the world around you. A world that is dominated by violence, predatory practices, deviant beliefs, demagogies, double standards that are passed on for normative, false hopes that are being sold to people in order to send them to places they don't want to go, but they have to go there anyway. Hero worship, cults of all sorts are springing up, left, down, right in front of us and positioning themselves to be the answer of our predicaments and ailments into this life. And those alternatives are not viable. So let's go back and see on how through the tradition, those who have understood the importance of calling Allah with His names, what happened to them, how did they put this into practice, and what impact did it have on their lives. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Surah Saba tells us, وَرَبُّكَ عَلَى كُلِّ شَيْءٍ حَفِيظٍ. I decided to pick this particular verse as opposed to the other names of Allah. There is this general misconception in general understanding of our education as Muslims that whenever we talk about the names of Allah, it automatically becomes material and it automatically becomes quantitative. Oh, I know, they are the 99. What 99? What's that about? Where did this become the main curriculum of Muslims? The 99 attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are a drop in the ocean of what describes Him. It's like you have a marvel, you have an incredible thing that cannot be harnessed in some way, and because we have this peanut-sized brains that need to understand something, the marvel of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has been reduced to 99 attributes that we can sink our teeth into. That's the cockpit. They don't describe the reality of what's behind it that is infinitely bigger and infinitely wider and infinitely more potent and more powerful. When Sayyidina Musa alayhi salam was instructed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who told him, I'm sure you remember the story, in his community people came to him and they said to him, is there an authority in knowledge that is more knowledgeable than you? And Prophet Musa alayhi salam says, I doubt it, because I'm the Prophet of Allah. I have the knowledge, the ceiling of knowledge as it exists today. So Allah intervenes on him and says, I doubt that you have all of the knowledge, and I'm going to show you that you don't. So set on a journey and go to a place, and it's the place where the two seas meet, etc. We don't have to get into any of this today. And he says, there you will find one of our people that we taught him from a knowledge that you don't have. Go to that place. You know the story in Surah Al-Kahf. So Sayyidina Musa gets onto the ship, the fishing dinghy by the people who were willing to give them a ride. And as they were in the middle of crossing the place that they needed to cross on the ship, Al-Khadir starts to scuttle the ship by literally removing wood panels and throwing them into the sea. And Musa tells him, what are you doing? So they have the exchange between them. And here is the part that we don't teach a lot about this particular verse to Muslims. Here is the part that we don't teach a lot. At the time of doing this, there was a little bird that flew over the fishing boat and went in and plunged its beak into the sea and then left. So Sayyidina Al-Khadir turns to Musa and tells him the following thing. Whatever you think is the knowledge that you came to acquire here, from whatever you are going to take from me, it represents what the amount of water that bird took through his beak from the entire ocean from which he took off again. So that's the vastness of what we are talking about. So that's the massive environment that we are talking about when we talk about the name of Allah. So in choosing one, I thought I would choose the name Hafiz, an incredibly beautiful name that is not a common currency that a lot of Muslims use day in and day out. It's hard to translate. So the best translation I could possibly use to describe it, Hafiz would be protector, preserver. A God who's a protector, who's a preserver of us, of our humanity, of our interaction, of our children, of our families, of everything that exists around us, in order for us to be whole in some way, that Allah has invested himself in calling his name, in calling himself by his name, in order for him to become the one that we can experience. So for this word Hafiz, what I thought I'll do is to share, in conclusion of this khutbah, a practical implementation of how the Prophet ﷺ has put, listen to this very carefully, if there is one thing to remember about this khutbah, is to remember this concluding remark, just to remember this one. So this is how the Prophet ﷺ puts an attribute of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala into action every day of his life. So this is the way he did it. ثبت في الحديث عن ابن مسعود رضي الله تعالى عنه أنه قال أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم كان يدعو. On the authority of Ibn Mas'ud, in an authentic hadith, he has reported that the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم used to have a special prayer that he used to make. And it goes like this: اللهم احفظني بالإسلام قائما واحفظني بالإسلام قاعدا واحفظني بالإسلام راقدا ولا تشمت بي عدوا حاسدا. So this is how now the rubber meets the road, where we go from theory and concepts and ideas to things that we can unleash, put them in practice, and they become transformative in our own being for every breath we take and for the permission we have for that breath to come out. And the action in our religion is called prayer. So it gets put into prayer. And that's exactly what the Prophet ﷺ did. So let me translate how the Prophet ﷺ prayed by using God's name called Al-Hafiz. So he calls upon him and he says, "O Allah, I ask that you protect and you preserve me in the name of Islam." I said, and I'm going to reiterate and invite us to the following thing. If there is one idea, one thought to take away today, it is this one. Okay. So the Prophet ﷺ goes to Allah and calls him by one of his excellent names, and he puts it into the active verb form. "O Allah, I pray by your excellent name of the protector and the preserver that you preserve me." With what? Bil Islami. Preserve me with the gift of Islam. So for anybody out there who's striving to the point where they are breathless and exhausted, looking for ways for Allah to preserve them, that is not based on Islam, it's like sabotaging your own recovery plan. Bil Islami. And in which state did the Prophet ﷺ ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to preserve him? With Islam. Preserve me when I am fully erect. What does that mean? Preserve me when I need you the least. But I want you to remember that when I needed you the least, I came to you. So I can invest in the time when I am in need. That because I came to you when I was at my time of ease, I will find you when I am at my time of need. واحفظني بالإسلام قاعدة, when I am in a state that is no longer erect, sitting down, and when I am in a state that is laying down. Now I am totally powerless. I am abandoned to your power and to your will. And that state too is a state where I want you to be my preserver. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, and yes, when we do these things, there are the naysayers that will come and tell us, what are you doing? Why are you believing in this fairy tale stuff and whatnot? And the idea would be to ignore that. It's not that we are not left brain dominant. It is that we are one of the rare people that use both of our sides of our brains. When it is time to use the left brain dominant analytical process that Allah has gifted us with, we answer the call. When it is time to think with our hearts and feel with our hearts and communicate with our hearts, we can also be present at that roll call. In that sense, we are able to recover our humanity, which is the combination of these two things. And in doing so, that's the true meaning of what it means to be a descendant of Adam and a follower of Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. أقول قولي هذا واستغفر الله لي ولكم فاستغفروه فيفوز المستغفرين. الحمد لله ثم الحمد لله واشهد ان لا اله الا الله وحده لا شريك له واشهد ان محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه واله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا. First, I want to begin with an apology. A number of people who have made dua requests over the last few weeks haven't had their dua done promptly, and amongst them is to make dua for Asifa Ahmed, Sayyid Mohamed Ismail, and Mohamed Hisamuddin. So if that did not happen, we apologize profusely for that not happening on time. So inshallah, the dua that I will make today will encompass you and call you in the midst of all of the other things we do. And inshallah ta'ala, as you say Ameen, the dua will be spread to all of you as well. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. اللهم لا تدع لنا ذنبا إلا غفرته ولا هما إلا فرجته ولا دينا إلا قضيته ولا مريضا إلا شفيته ولا مبتلا إلا عافيته ولا ضالا إلا هديته ولا غائبا إلا رددته ولا مظلوما إلا نصرته ولا أسيرا إلا فككته ولا ميتا إلا رحمته. اللهم انصر من نصر دين محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم واجعلنا منهم واخذل من خذل دين محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم ولا تجعلنا منهم. عباد الله، أوصيكم بنفسي بتقوى الله وأقم الصلاة إن الصلاة تنهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا.
الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله.
Assalamu alaikum, brothers and sisters. We have a very large crowd today, so I'm going to ask everybody, inshallah ta'ala, to be an example of the spirit of what we did in our khutbah. Squeeze the rows a little bit, make room for everybody on the brother's side and the sister's side, and please make sure that nobody will have to pray outside or next to the shoes. For the brothers, if you keep moving to your right, there is still a little bit more room on your right, please. Fill some of the rows before we start a new one. Keep going to your right, please. For the brothers, keep going to your right until you fill all of the rows to your right. There is room on your right, inshallah. Barakallahu fikum for complying, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala write ajr for you and tawab for having accommodated your brothers and sisters.